Morning, everybody. Happy hump day and welcome to the news agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined for the first time, I think, by the Mirror's business editor, Graham Hiskett. Morning, Graham.
Good morning, Susie. Good morning, everyone. Hello.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Be gentle with them, everybody. Now, this is the People's Pay-Per-View, so get into the comments, ask us your questions. We'll do our best to answer them for you. Those of you listening on podcast, we'll just have to wait and see whether Donald Trump, what he says, is ever going to be what he actually delivers. We'll be discussing that in some more detail with tariffs and so on later on. But what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on a press conference held yesterday by the lawyer for Lucy Letby, who was convicted of killing 15 babies in her care when she was a nurse on a neonatal ward. It was attended by Tory MP David Davis and several senior medics who all said they had looked at the evidence and could not find any sign of murders. We've got a little clip from the press conference and we're going to play it for you now.
Lucy was charged with 7 murders and 7 attempted murders. In our opinion, the medical evidence doesn't support murder in any of these babies, just natural causes and bad medical care.
Graham, now you've, like me, you've sat in your fair share of courts over the years. Yeah. There's always, in cases, any medical death care, murder case, there's always medical experts who disagree, especially when it comes to medicine. And when it comes to really delicate things like babies, stuff that's hard to spot, like causes of death in very tiny, small, very new babies. Is this any different, does it feel, to a normal, everyday difference of medical opinion that you might get?
No, I don't think it does in many ways. I mean, as you say, Susie, I've sat through long trials, and often when you sit through these trials, you go the detail is immense, and you often learn a huge amount about a subject in a relatively short space of time. But let's remember that it's the jury that sat through the entirety of this evidence and heard from both sides. You know, this is a snapshot of medical evidence. I mean, I think it's important to raise the questions, but nevertheless, we've got to remember that it was a court of law with a jury that sat through the entirety and came to their verdicts. And I think that's an important point, and B, we've got it. Susie, you'll probably move on to this, but what this must be doing to the families of those babies, and what it's just. I mean, the lawyer in this case talks about, who's leading this defense, talks about hoping it might bring closure to those families. I think it will do the opposite, don't you? Yeah. I mean, it's just be bringing it up again and again for them.
I think, yeah, especially as they've felt that the person responsible for the deaths of their children, and it's tragic enough, I think, for them to come to terms with the fact that was one of the nurses. And someone that they spoke to regularly and entrusted with their children, if that was the case. And then to learn that now it wasn't that, but maybe it was negligence or, mishandling in some way, that's just going to be a whole new level of horrible and unpleasant stuff to deal with. But I'm interested in knowing what our viewers think about all this. Lucy Letby, her trial, all that stuff was incredibly saturated with coverage at the time. Louise says, you've got to be kidding. She should never be let out. I found it very difficult to explain this to my daughter last night, who was watching the news. Raymond says Lucy was used as a scapegoat. It's simple. These are the 2 points I was trying to get across to my 8-year-old, right? This is someone who's been accused of killing lots of babies by doing something really difficult to spot, injecting insulin or air into them in some way. Oi says the NHS is guilty. And I had to say, well, look, she's been accused of this. She got convicted of that. But now these experts are saying it was negligence. It's the NHS. Things aren't working properly. And, she's had the finger pointed at her by perhaps some of the doctors who should have taken better care. And that's the allegation. And so my daughter turned around and goes, well, so what's the truth then? Is she a murderer or not? And the fact is, isn't it, that if we don't really know, and that division of opinion in our viewers there seems to make it very clear that there isn't a unanimous verdict anywhere, under those circumstances, a conviction is unsafe, because she might be a killer, she might not. It's the might that means someone has to walk free, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and that is that's the job of the Criminal Cases Review Commission, and to look at any new evidence, and that case has been handed to them. It's a long process. Many a case has been past them, and they've decided it hasn't been before. But I've been involved with one when I was before this in the Midlands, where a case was reopened and actually a conviction was overturned. But I just think we have to go back to the fact that, as you quite rightly say, I mean, we don't know. You and I, we don't. Everyone here, sadly, we don't know. But I can have a lot more faith in, is that those that sat through the entirety of the trial, and not just the jury, I mean, but also, maybe the reporters sat through that all the evidence. There's a lot of people that we've got to entrust our faith in the jury system, if we do, that they came to the correct decision. Now, obviously, if new evidence comes forward, then it's important that that is considered. That there are miscarriages of justice, and if we were in a system where it was never looked our game, then that would be a very dangerous place to be.
Yeah, well, that's the narrow thing, isn't it? It's whether this evidence is new or it was exactly the same kind of thing that was discussed in court, because the defence presented medical experts saying it's not murder. Prosecution presented medical experts saying it was murder. They each got to question each other, and the jury got to decide who they thought was probably true. Now, since her conviction, Lucy's been at the centre of lots of online conspiracy theories about how she was a patsy to cover up deficient medical care, that she was picked on by these doctors, but it's also picked up traction from other quarters, more reputable. So not just armchair detectives, but politicians, high-profile journalists, lots of whom were not in the court, as you've said, Graham. Even Nadine Dorries, who these days, unfortunately, seems to be both a politician and a journalist. I suppose the question, though, is whether that means, and what people will be thinking is that because it's attracted some other people, not your tinfoil hatters, there are other people attached to this too, that there is more weight to it, that there is more, that it does start to smell a bit bad, because other people are going, no, there's definitely something a bit amiss there, that it does smell like. Does it smell to you like a story of injustice? I mean, it's difficult to say from a distance, isn't it? But most journalists kind of knows this. So,
Well, I think you're right. I mean, look, the fact is, you've got politicians like David Davis who've pinning their colours to the mast. They're putting their reputation on the line for this. So I think when you've got sort of, dare I say it, mainstream definitely mainstream politicians who are putting their name to this, then I think it's right that it's that we're looking at it in more detail. I mean, I think the way that we presented the story today was absolutely right, kind of putting both sides really. And I think that's the way that we should all maybe consider it at the moment, but against the backdrop of, well, A, as I keep on saying, that the jury came to its decision, but B, that let's not forget what we're talking about here, who are, her families who went through the most awful traumatic experience, and the most traumatic experience, let's face it, that they could, and the sort of the campaign or the conspiracy and everything else doesn't overshadow that. That we've got to keep those people who, let's face it, we often we hear from their lawyers, etc., but we don't tend to hear from directly. So anyway, so it's important that those their views, which are the most legitimate in all of this, are not drowned out by the momentum of this campaign, though at the same time asking legitimate questions. That's what we should be doing in a society.
I think any of our viewers who are a little bit don't know, what's this all about, or I don't know if I agree, or I don't know, so have a look at the Mirror today, because the spread that they've produced across 2 pages is one of the things that the Mirror does very well, okay?
Yeah.
It's a very clear, very concise, very even-handed description of what happened, where we are now, and what the new thing is. And it will help you make up your mind and help you perhaps come to some sort of decision about the stuff you're going to be seeing online from people going, oh, she's innocent, oh, she's a patsy, oh, she's guilty, or whatever. This is how you can figure it out and get a little bit more knowledge about it. Now,
sorry, you're absolutely right, and that is just that's at the heart of a lot of what these conspiracies is. We're able to, in the mainstream media, there might be backlash against what I say, but are able to present the facts in this way without sort of just pushing one particular, on what's case like this, one particular sort of agenda. Anyway, sorry.
Exactly, quite right. Richard says the reviewed opinion raises more questions than it solves. Was the average number of deaths at this hospital not above the expected levels for the normal atrocities? And that's one of the reasons why, of course, the alarm was first raised, was that the number of baby deaths was more than you would expect, even at neonatal units where babies and deaths happen because of cock-ups all the time. Right? It was excessive, and if that's the case, you would expect to find, feces up the wall or something, some other sign that other things are going wrong. Italian Wolverine, possibly not his real name, says she got reported so many times. They did keep thinking it was her, but of course, after a while, these things can become self-perpetuating, can't they? Leslie says, how many other court cases would this affect? Well, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to quickly explain before we move on to the next story. Lucy's lawyer is saying this must now be considered for a retrial. The problem is that Lucy Letby has already been refused an appeal against her conviction. So that means the only route for her now is the Criminal Cases Review Commission, which has had lots of problems with missing stuff. The case of Andrew Malkinson, who spent 17 years locked up for rape, is one of them. Now, that does not decide evidence or guilt, the CCRC. It has to rule on whether there is any significant new evidence which would exonerate a convicted criminal, and either means they should be retried, or, like in the case of Andrew Malkinson, DNA evidence or something that says you were definitely somewhere else, someone else definitely did it, then you just quash the conviction because it's plainly, there's no point even going through a retrial. We don't have that kind of fresh DNA evidence or anything like that, or an alibi in this case. We've just got medical experts who are disagreeing. Now, if they had at the original trial, if they disagreed at the original trial and they had experts on both sides, this isn't new. If they were questioned properly on both sides and properly interrogated that evidence, then this isn't freshly new. There isn't much new here if that all was done properly in the trial. And that's one of the things they're going to look at is go, well, did they do this in the trial? If so, yeah, might be a different medical expert, but the number of experts against the other doesn't matter, because if it had a retrial, the prosecution would go and find some other doctors who would support it, because that's how medical opinion works, right? What you do have is this continuing, probably growing sort of outrage and questions about her innocence and guilt. And meanwhile, as we've said, there are 14 sets of parents who thought the killer of their babies had been caught and having all this pulled out of them all over again, and they're not being able to deal with their grief or move on with their lives. Graham, as we've said, I think the parents are kind of being forgotten in all this, but what we're basically left with at the end of everything is a really good publicity campaign. And I can think of quite a few convicted people who have got one of those. They're still in jail. Is that all we've got? Another, Jeremy Bamber or something? Or am I just being cynical?
Well, it is a good campaign. I mean, from a sort of, if you like, from a PR perspective, absolutely, it is. But I mean, it's interesting though when you've got the likes of David Davies kind of putting their name to it, because then I think, and Nadine Norris. Okay, but anyway, you've got people who, I mean, why would these people be putting their names to it? I mean, it certainly is it's certainly attaching themselves with a strong campaign for somebody for calling for justice, and that can't be a bad thing for them as well. But I don't know. I think, as you say, there are lots of people in prison who would say the same thing about there's been a miscarriage of justice. Most of those people don't get any sort of publicity at all. Maybe rightly so. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, there'll be others who really genuinely are locked up for something they haven't done, going, why can't I get that kind of attention?
Who don't have anything like the same oxygen of publicity. Absolutely.
Yeah, because they're not a young woman who's been convicted of killing babies. That's
absolutely
always get more
it definitely ticks a few boxes in that sense.
And just on that point, Steve on Twitter says, imagine the lawyers getting ready to get her compensation and book deals on her release. I think they could probably do book deals before her release as well. So we may even expect some of that. Who knows? I don't doubt there's probably a very enterprising journalist getting in touch with them right now, offering to ghostwrite it. Now, elsewhere in the world, let's just clear our minds of that for a moment. Elsewhere in the world, Donald Trump is being his usual self. And he's threatening to take over a legally defined part of Palestine and level it, forcing 1 million people to relocate, creating refugees, if I'm not mistaken, even while cutting the aid that his country gives refugees. And the richest man in the world is taking money away from the poorest people in the world, and everyone seems to be fine with it. But underneath all of that has been this business of a tariff war. I mean, as far as Donald Trump's concerned, everything is a business anyway. He's threatened to raise taxes on some imported goods to punish or convince other countries to do what he wants. Graham, this is more your wheelhouse. Can you take us through what Trump's been doing over the past sort of week and where we are now?
Sure. Okay. Well, tariffs to Trump is the most beautiful word in the dictionary, I think, is what he's supposedly said. I can think of a few more beautiful words in the dictionary. Nevertheless, anyway, so remember that he is first and foremost a businessman, a maverick businessman, and just it seems somehow it's been found himself in the White House. Anyway, I'm being slightly flippant, but nevertheless, I think so what he's basically done is he's used tariffs. What are tariffs? They're a tax that's added to the cost of imported goods when they come into the country. They're paid by the importer anyway, blah blah. Nevertheless, he's using basically the tariffs for other countries, which makes their goods more expensive, as a bargaining chip essentially, to get things that he wants out in various different ways. When it came to Mexico and Canada, which are currently supposedly in what's called a free trade agreement, which means that those goods can flow across the border, and it's vast amounts that do, tariff free. He basically tore that up with one executive order, and threatened to impose tariffs of 25% on a vast array of goods. Now, obviously, I'm sure viewers will know that he's pressed the pause button on that for 30 days after getting some concessions. But it's gone ahead with a 10% tariffs on Chinese goods, an extra 10%. There were already tariffs in place on some Chinese goods, which comes back to his first term. Anyway, and those are going ahead, although there are, as you mentioned right at the beginning, I think there are talks between him and the Chinese president are due to take place. But we've still got the potential threat of tariffs against the EU as well. Not the UK. For the time being.
He says not the UK, but what Donald Trump says and what Donald Trump does, often different things. So this is, if I've got this right, tell me if I'm wrong, but this is basically a tool by which you can damage another country's economy and directly at them, because you're cutting off, you're taxing their goods, so therefore you're probably going to sell fewer goods, therefore their businesses are going to make less money, therefore taxing them. But at the same time, it hurts your own economy because your own people can't buy those goods as cheaply. It's going to cost them more money. It means there's less money for other things. It means inflation. It means other stuff going off. And if you are, I suppose, the biggest economy in the world, as America is, you tend to think, well, whoever this hurts is going to hurt the other guys more because we'll recover better than anybody else does. And of course, those tariffs that haven't happened yet, he's just bullied them, and it seems to have worked okay. So there's this 30-day delay for the tariffs on Canada and Mexico, but China's lawyered up, haven't they? And I thought as well, if you've got a free trade agreement, Canada and Mexico could have lawyered up. They could have just said, you know what, international deal. He hasn't gone through Congress with any of this stuff. It's probably illegal what he's doing. China's issued some kind of a court case, and they're upping the ante by increasing some tariffs on American goods that go into China, because they're determined to go toe-to-toe with him. Why do you think Canada and Mexico have caved, but China is going, nah, mate, let's have it?
Well, I mean, because he's picked a fight with, he's bullied Mexico and Canada. I mean, the argument was that it was following through an election pledge, which was to tackle immigration, but perhaps more importantly, from Canada's point of view, the import of fentanyl, which is terrible, awful drug epidemic in the States, and that's also one of his arguments for China as well. Anyway, but he's been out. I mean, it's only a delay, so we'll see what happens. I mean, business is taking it very seriously that it won't stay in place, this pulling of the threat. But anyway, Yeah, I mean, basically, he's got a lot more leverage over those two, Mexico and Canada, because of the amount of trade that's done between them. Huge amount of trade with China, world's second biggest economy, but obviously China has the vaster trade with other countries as well. I mean, he could basically bully his two closest neighbours into probably caving into what he wants. China, he's picked a fight with a much bigger foe compared with those two. And yeah, I mean, it's got the ability to give them a bloody nose in return. But the tariffs that have been announced, as you said, by China are relatively. I mean, they're on things like certainly energies and some relating to cars, etc. But they're kind of fairly peripheral, really, in the grand scheme of things. So I guess he's just thinking that he's using intimidation as a sort of a weapon to try and get what he wants, and is working on the assumption that China will, as you say, he's got a lot to lose as well. So we'll see reason and come to some sort of compromise.
Yeah, I'm kind of left wondering who Trump's actually hurting with this, and whether he's being as clever as he thinks he is. And some people are treating him like he's like the big businessman and the deal maker and all the rest of it. But some of the US press are going, do you know what? He blinked. He blinked with Canada and Mexico. He took the concession, he took the deal, and he wasn't as tough. He's just like, they're just offered this, and he's gone, okay, that'll do, in order to walk away, kind of, from the argument. Yeah. He does seem, powerful for bullying other people. But does he there's something that I saw during the week about something called integrative bargaining, right? Anybody wants to know what that is, to Google it. Integrative bargaining. If you are trying to bully someone to do what you want with, say, a tariff, you can go, do that or else. That's all fine, so long as it's you and them, and you're the only market and they're the only seller and all the rest of it, and you've got just a two-way deal. But when things aren't that binary, and actually you may need them long-term, that you may want to do more business with them in the future. It's a bit like, as a journalist, it's working your contact. Do you want to screw this person and just do the story? And I don't care, I'm never going to speak to you again. Or is it someone you want to keep going back to? Is it someone you don't want to make a complaint? Is it somebody that you want to, cultivate somehow as a source? Do you want to be friends with them actually in the long term? Then you have to be a bit more integrative in your bargaining and say, well, look, what do you need? What do I need? Why don't we find a way to meet in the middle? How about we get there? All the rest of it. His tactics that he's doing, I mean, they may work sometimes in the boardrooms if you're a real estate, billionaire, but it doesn't necessarily work with nation states all the time, does it? Have we seen anything like this before with other countries? I suppose.
No, he's definitely rewriting the rule book, ripping after having ripped up. But no, I mean, we haven't seen anything. Well, we saw a bit of it obviously in this first term, but this is actually sort of going beyond even that. Certainly in the speed at which it's announced these things. No, I mean, it's a high risk tactic. And as you say, did it work with Canada and Mexico? I know. I mean, 10,000 extra troops on the border with Mexico. Some promises of action from Canada. I mean, these are, well, time will tell, I guess. But I mean, he's picking. I mean, I think when we talked about the UK as well. I mean, the tightrope analogy is used a lot for the UK. I mean, we are walking such a tightrope because. And also, everyone's holding out for this. Okay, so we can do a trade deal with the US. Well, yeah, great. Okay, we will be able to escape any tariffs. Well, I mean, look what happened to the trade deal with Mexico and Canada. So you have a trade deal with Trump, but it's probably not worth the paper it's written on. Potentially.
Yeah, because he'll tear it up next week, won't he?
Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you can't hold it. And then also, then you get into the weeds of what that actually means in terms of having a trade deal, in terms of what we'd have to sort of allow in with far less scrutiny. Something thinking about sort of maybe agricultural products,
exactly.
Maybe
it's always
and things like that. So
yeah, it's a two-way thing, isn't it? Now, as Leslie was saying, there is this just a case of Trump, saying he's going to do something, and actually, it's not quite that. I think you probably hit the
some of that. Yeah, it's definitely sort of his tactic is go for. I mean, look what we're seeing with Gaza. He sort of goes for it's almost going for the headline, isn't it? In a sense, going for the extreme, and then anything, and then kind of rowing back from that. But sort of the shock tactic, he hopes will achieve some of his aim.
A lot of it is performative, we think. Now, Paul says China has much more patience. Trump is part of Western politics, short-termism, quick hit, go for the headline, get the big burst now kind of thing. Do you share deals, whatever it might be. China will be happy to play the long game. Got to see that. But I suppose, how are the markets reacting to all this? You know, internationally, are the markets going, yeah, Trump's got it right, and they're betting on him? Or are they looking a bit more, don't think so?
Well, remember that we knew that tariffs were on the cards before. You know, it was there in the election. He threatened brought up the prospect of tariffs. So it's quite telling that on Monday, when it was overnight Sunday into Monday, when it was emerged, that the stock markets, financial markets, were sent into panic, and hundreds of billions were wiped off share prices, around the world. And so, no, they weren't. I mean, they weren't. I guess that's a measure of the fact that though they heard the words beforehand, they didn't necessarily think it was going to come into practice. So, no, they are taking it. They are taking it very seriously. I mean, it's probably, when I'm talking to business leaders at the moment, this is if they have international trade, then this is the sort of the number one thing that they're concerned about. In fact, the Bank of England, which is going to meet tomorrow to decide on interest rates, that's going to be the threat of tariffs is going to be one of the things that they'll consider, and that matters because so that matters in terms of all of our mortgages and savings rates. So going off with a bit of a tangent, but nevertheless, it really does matter.
Yeah, well, let's just go on to a bit about how the final question: how this is going to all affect Britain, and if it does. Your column today is talking about the drinks giant Diageo, which has got slumps in sales of spirits, but is selling lots more Guinness. I don't know why, because gin is so much better than that awful stuff. But does any of that come from or go to the US? The boss of Guinness is going, well, this is fantastic. We're selling more beer. But do those prices go up or down if there's a trade war between the US and someone else, or is it going to affect us in some way?
The short answer is that Guinness aside, Guinness is slightly more. That's a more of a sort of a British success. The amount of Guinness, they can't make enough of it. I mean, you might not like it by the sounds of things, Susie, but they
tastes like awful. Tastes like vomit.
They've broadened the appeal. Far more women like it. They've done a really clever social media campaigns and also 0.0, which is a very if you want a 0% beer. Then that's going. They literally cannot make enough of it. Anyway, but yeah, Diageo. So you think it's tequila from Mexico, certain whiskies from Canada. Those a huge amount of their sales in the US come from those products that come from Canada and Mexico. So it's more that than Guinness. That in fact it's that more than Guinness. But yeah, I mean that they talked about 160 million. Being knocked off their profits as a result of these tariffs if they went ahead, and that's just in the next 4 months. So this is the real world impact and prices. Yeah, I mean certainly the potential is there for prices to go up for those products in the US. Yeah, definitely.
No. What about here then? Because is he going to use this bullying about the tariff trails to sort of split us further from the EU, just at a time when Keir Starmer is trying to edge us slightly closer for trade reasons? He's going to try and just hive us off and really put a wedge between us, really treat us like a small firm that he's taken over, force his products on us, even if we don't want hormone-fed beef, crappy medical care, all the rest of it, and go, no, you have to be my best friend. Because Keir Starmer's going to be in a sticky position there. The big guy in the playground, 4,000 miles away, but he's very big. And the actual person that you spend all your time with in class is sort of right here, but wants you to do entirely different. Where do you go?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I mean, yeah, that's exactly that. I mean, let's face it. How much does he really care about the US for his own means? This is all about Trump. This is all about America first. This is if we can somehow play a part, then I mean, and also so we could talk about this trade, any potential trade deal. It's all going to be weighted in America's favor. What is it for the UK? How much does they have to give free access to America's markets for us without getting a huge amount in return? I think we should be looking at this very skeptically. But from Keir Starmer's point of view, an incredibly I mean, all tight ropes are narrow, aren't they? But nevertheless, this is the narrowest of tight ropes he has to walk. And also, and you're dealing with a maverick, a bully that you can't really predict Trump as well, can you? Apart from the fact that you can't predict him, apart from that you can't predict him. So that's it's going to be a very hard negotiations, on both sides on trade front.
It depends how much Donald Trump really, I suppose, thinks that he needs us. But America has no real need for kettles, decent cups of tea, or irony. So it would seem that we haven't got much to give them.
No, I mean, again, we have a bridgehead into, his bridgehead into Europe in terms for different things. And I guess, I mean, he doesn't, and also he's probably looking on an international stage far beyond, the UK. But I mean, there is a lot that he can get out of the UK, which in the short term, I suppose. So there is if we can make it to our advantage, sure. But we need to go into any talks on any trade deal with him being extremely skeptical.
Yes, I think so. And also bearing in mind that he's mainly an ego on legs, or a tango tyrant. The way to keep him happy, of course, is just to keep him happy. So, activate the king, throw Kate Middleton at him, whatever it takes.
Well, he loves a royal. He loves a royal. Yeah, he loves. He loves meeting the queen, didn't he? Came over. So
exactly. You can have a month at Balmoral if you stay off the NHS, for example. You'd probably be able to do it. Who knows? We can give it a try. Anyway, thank you for that, Graham. Thank you everyone for taking part. We have managed to find some good news in the world for you, and here it is. Now, we've all said it and we've all heard it from our mums as well. When things grim, you're despairing a bit, it'll all seem better in the morning. And we probably just thought that was all just words. But turns out it's true. Scientists from the University College of London, perhaps it should be renamed the University of what your mum thinks is bleeding obvious, have traced 50,000 Brits post-pandemic mental health and found that we generally go to bed feeling our worst and wake up feeling at our best. We are more satisfied with life, we have better well-being, and we feel more worthwhile first thing in the day. Graham, is this proof that perhaps, as your column mentions, we are drinking far less than we used to and the hangovers really aren't as bad? Or perhaps it's that our mum was actually right? What do you think?
Well, I take issue with the fact that first thing in the morning, I don't know what your first thing, Susie, and the viewers on here, but
a little bit
this time of year, when first time it's actually dark outside. So definitely, I wouldn't necessarily go with the argument that it's very first thing in the morning is the brightest and the happiest time of the day. I think it's the type of person you are, isn't it? I mean, I know the study, it's based on good research, but no, I mean, I think it's whether you're a morning person, you an evening person. I think it's certainly the weather. I mean, look, if it's sunny outside, which it kind of is today, and I think it will be tomorrow, I think that has a much bigger impact on your mood, doesn't it? I mean, that's from my personal feeling, anyway.
Yeah, I think it's the time of year. This time of year, I open the curtains first thing in the morning, and I go, ugh.
Yes.
Exactly. I want to draw them again and go straight back to bed. Whereas when spring comes, you go, oh, and it's so much nicer. But anyway, that's what science has found. It's better in the morning. So however you feel right now, everybody, this is as good as it's going to get. All right, for the rest of the day, so make the most of it. Thank you, Graham, for taking us through all that. Thank you, everyone, for taking part. I think Prime Minister's questions will be at 12 o'clock on these channels, so come back for that if you want to see Keir Starmer and the latest and whatever's happening with tariff trade war, or if David Davis asks about Lucy Letby, who knows. We will be back next Monday for another edition of the News Agenda. Till then, everybody, stay safe, take care, tatty bye.